As long as I was going after the crooks that didn't have badges, I was everybody's hero.
Okay, David, let's talk about how it is you got from the Guitar Center on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood to Waco. How long between that meeting with David and Steve Schneider until you moved to Waco?
I'd say probably 6 to 9 months.
All right. Now, had David and Steve already gone back to Waco, or were they in L.A. that whole time?
I think they were in L.A. the whole time. They may have had one trip back to Waco and then come back.
How did they talk you into going to Waco?
They said, okay, you've gotten us to know us quite a bit better, and we'd love for you to be our drummer, but there's more to us than that. And, a lot of it has to do with this book. And we got a big group of people coming for Passover, and we're going to be at Mount Carmel studying. And we're basically, Dave's going to go through the whole 7 seals and show people what they mean, where they are. It's going to be very intense study. It's going to be every day, probably about 8 hours of study a day. It's going to be for 2 weeks, and there'll be people from all over the world. We probably have 130, 140 people coming in just for this. And they said, do you want to go? At the time, I had a dead end job. And I'm like, if you guys pay my bills, yeah, I'll go. And they agreed to do that. So sure, I got on the bus and went. I was young, and I was, things weren't going great in my band.
So David and Steve had already gone back to Waco, and then you caught the bus to Waco, or did y'all all ride the bus together?
I think Dave went, and then the rest of us took the bus, as I recall. Yeah, David wasn't on the bus. I think he drove his Camaro. But yeah, they had a bus as well, and I went with, it was Greg Summers, Jamie Casillo, some of the younger guys that I hung out with.
So David...
Wally could have been there on that trip. I'm not 100% sure, though.
David drove his Camaro back.
I think so, yeah.
Would that be the same Camaro that was smashed by the tanks out in front of the Davidian home?
Well, that was the Paul Fetta's El Dorado.
Oh, okay.
El Camino, I'm sorry.
El Camino.
Yeah, El Camino. That's the one the tanks ran over. And that's interesting. David Kresh's car, they towed off, but they chose to smash Paul's.
Oh, okay. See, I'd always been under the impression they had smashed David's.
No, that car ended up in a museum in Las Vegas.
How'd that happen?
There's some kind of, I can't remember what the museum's called. It's some Museum of the Dark or Museum of the Strange.
Who sold it to him?
I don't know.
I mean, I'm wondering if the government seized it and sold it to him, or was it David's estate?
Most of the assets were given to the attorneys because that's all they had in lieu of payment, is my understanding. The motorcycles, things like that.
All right. And by the attorneys, you talking about the criminal defense attorneys or the civil attorneys?
Criminal defense.
And who would those guys have been?
I'm not sure exactly. I know Rocket Rosen.
Okay.
Was Mike, not Mike Cadell. I'm trying to think of who Clive Doyle's attorney was. They just did a really interesting documentary on Clive and his attorney.
Okay.
That really got into the case. It was very interesting. I can't remember.
I hadn't heard of that documentary.
Boy, I wish I could remember that.
What about Dick DeGuerin? What do you remember about Dick DeGuerin? He was the one who ended up being David's attorney.
Yeah, he was hired by David's mother, Bonnie.
Yeah.
And him and Jack Zimmerman. Jack Zimmerman was hired to be Steve Schneider's attorney.
Okay.
And they came in during the siege.
Yes.
Which was very interesting because no one was allowed to go in, obviously.
Right.
But his attorneys were able to go in and see the evidence of the bullet holes in the ceiling, which to me was very important, showed that the helicopters were shooting into the building.
At lunch, I told you about my contact with David's mom.
Yeah.
But by then, I had already won BELO. I thought I had more money than God. And I was living in Austin, had bought a big mansion down there, and I was offering to represent all of the Davidians for free. It was in the newspaper. I'd been on TV saying it. And this was before all the power got cut off to the Davidian home. It got to where the FBI, ATF didn't want you guys being able to communicate at all with the outside world.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'd been in the paper and on TV saying, I'll represent everybody out there for free if we can just stop the bloodshed. I will go in and I will talk with him. I'll negotiate something. And I get a phone call from David's mom. I can't remember her name right now.
Bonnie Haldeman.
Bonnie, yeah. Talking to me about that. Oh, you've been in the paper. You've said, I said, yes, I would. Yes, I would. And I told her a little bit about my story, and she was impressed with that. And I remember telling my wife about the phone call, and I had agreed to go to Waco from Austin and try to work out something. And I got a phone call that very afternoon from a friend of mine, Truman Simons. Truman was a sheriff's deputy with Jack Harwell's office. When I was DA, he was assigned to my office as a homicide investigator. Truman and I were very close. I trusted Truman a lot, still do. And phone rings and it's Truman. He said, Vic, are you coming to Waco? I said, yeah, I was planning on it. I got a call from David's mom. He said, well, I was just approached by somebody with, I don't remember if he said ATF or FBI. And they said, you tell Feazell, he got away with it last time, but if he comes up here to Waco, we have a bullet with his name on it. Swear to God. That scared me, man, because they tried to warn me away from the Lucas thing, and I wouldn't do it. I ended up being indicted and looking at 80 years. So I talked to my wife, and I prayed about it, and I was thinking there are a lot of other good lawyers besides me.
Yeah,
so
I find it a good policy when someone says they're going to kill you to believe them.
Yeah, I know, especially when it's some people that had already sent 30 folks to town to arrest me.
Yeah.
Ransacked my office, ransacked my home. So I called her back and told her what had happened. And so I can't. But I gave her 3 names, and Dick was one of the names I gave her. And then the next thing I hear was on TV that DeGuerin was up there and going into the compound. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That would have been, what a thing.
I really sometimes second guess that decision because I wonder if I could have made a difference, you know. And I think the world of Dick DeGuerin, I do.
Yeah.
But Dick has never been the target of an FBI investigation. I had.
Yeah.
My home had been bugged. They listened to every phone call, every conversation. If I was going to have a private conversation with my wife, we went out into the backyard and turned the water sprinklers on. Just so we could talk in private. Just like they killed the Davidians' dogs. Yeah, first victims out there were the dogs. Same with me. They killed my dog because my dog would bark and warn me when they were climbing the telephone pole to bug my phone. Yeah. And so I would have been much more cautious over what I allowed into the building. If they'd have given me a box of groceries to take in, I swear to God, I would have torn it apart the minute I got through the front door.
Well, that's the funny thing. We did.
You did? And you didn't find the bugs?
No, we did.
Oh, you did find them.
That's what's I'm glad you brought that up because that's what's so funny. It's not funny, but it's the fact the FBI still talks about these bugs.
Like they pulled something off.
They didn't pull anything off. Every single time they sent something in, it was bugged. We took all the bugs and we put them in a closet.
I'm glad to hear that.
All the bugs were in one room. So any kind of surveillance that they had was not from them bugging us. We weren't idiots.
So the crap they claim they have off of those bugs is bullshit.
Either that or yes. Let's get that out in the open.
Because they claim that there's conversation they picked up on those bugs about some of the Davidians talking about starting the fire.
Yeah. I know now, even the technology back then, they had the technology to make anyone say whatever they wanted on any kind of bugs. Now, if all the bugs were in one room, that means that anything they picked up, either A, you had to have been said close to that closet, or at night they were sneaking under the building and putting stuff around that we didn't know about. That's a possibility. The problem that I had very early on, when I had to meet with a grand jury after everything happened, they played an example of one of the bugs, and they gave me a script, and they typed out what I was supposedly hearing, and you could hear It was very grainy, very hard to hear. I made them play it 4 or 5 times. And to me, it sounded like they were saying, whoever I was listening to, and I could not make out the voice of who it actually was saying, okay, cut the power. And I had them play it 4 times, and okay, cut the power. And what I was reading on the script that they wanted me to read was, okay, start the fire.
Oh, my God.
And I said, he's not saying start the fire, they're saying cut the power. And the grand jury went, like, collectively, a sigh, instantly making me feel like I'm the liar and I'm guilty. And it made me angry, but at the time, I did feel guilty.
Yeah.
Because that's what they do. They put you in when, there's that many people from the community and everyone believes one way, it's really hard to fight against that psychologically. But in front of you, in front of God, I'll swear on a stack of Bibles that I heard the person on the thing say, cut the power. Now, what context would that be in? We did have generators on the property. So maybe, I don't know what the context was. All I know is it did not sound like start the fire to me.
Yeah.
Now, they claim there's other tapes that I've never heard, or like they played one on NPR once when they did something, and it was like, pour some here, pour some there. I doubt the validity of that. I just do.
Well, you were in the building.
I didn't see it yet. Nobody.
You never saw that. You never saw anybody pouring gasoline. Correct. You never saw anybody lighting matches.
Absolutely not.
Throwing burned newspaper on the floor. You never saw anything like that.
Not at all. Not in the area that I was in. That did not happen.
And you were there.
I was in the chapel area.
And you were a man who was close to David Koresh.
Yeah.
I've heard you referred to as one of his, you probably don't like this phrase, but one of his lieutenants.
Really?
One of his people in charge.
Really?
Yeah.
I was just a musician. I was well liked, but I don't think I was ever in a position where I was given, I was never over other people. I just consider myself to be a musician. I didn't even like when other people would go out and fire at the firing range, a couple times I went out and did that, but guns were not my thing, any of that whole aspect of it.
During the attack, though, you had a gun, though, didn't you?
Actually, everyone was handed a gun early before the raid, and I put mine under my bed.
Okay. You never shot out the window?
No, absolutely not.
See, that's another thing I've heard is that Thibodeau was there shooting that rifle out the window, just like if he was in Vietnam or something.
I'm the guy that would have stood in front of the tank at Tiananmen Square and held my fist up. I wish to go through my life without taking another. It's just a personal philosophy of mine. I reflect when I have hurt people in the past, and I have had I'm a gregarious person, boisterous drummer. I have done things to hurt people, and I feel terrible about it. The last thing I would ever want to do is shoot at or hurt somebody. It's physically like that. When I say hurt, I mean just from being a careless human being younger, especially when you're younger, you do things thoughtlessly.
Yeah.
So I reflect on these things all through my life. So I would much rather have been run over by the tank than shoot at the tank. That's just how I am. So no, I did not fire. From the second the bullet started hitting, I was on the ground. And that a part of this, I lived in Hollywood, and there were times where you'd walk down the street, you would hear gunshots. The tourists would be looking to see where the gunshots were coming from, and you'd be
the locals were on the ground.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I was tempered. I was tempered to hear gunshots and hit the deck. And that's exactly what I did. Hey, I'm not proud of it, but that's just who I am. I'm not something I'm not.
Well, it was the smartest thing. It was the smartest.
Yeah.
And they were videotaping everything that went on. If you had been sticking a rifle out that window, they'd have had a videotape of that.
Yeah, it's interesting how the videotapes disappear when it's...
Isn't it?
When it has to do with their crimes.
I can understand a few videotapes disappearing. How did the front door disappear?
Yeah.
How'd so much of the physical evidence disappear?
Three tapes. 2 tapes disappeared. One was recorded over of the early stages of the raid. All gone. And then, the physical front door, its sister door is entered into evidence. The one that has the fewest bullet holes in it.
Uh-huh.
And the door that has all the bullet holes from the outside coming in. And you can even see that in some of the pictures. That never shows. Oh, it must have disintegrated in the fire.
Yeah, right.
So, as an American, you're raised with this illusion that we have freedom of the press, that we have certain unalienable rights. You have a right to defend yourself. You have a right to an attorney. All these things, beautiful. A right to a fair trial. I have not seen that in my lifetime. Like, on the rare cases where an underdog actually wins, I praise. I'm very happy for that individual. My experience has been quite different.
I was an underdog that won, but I got to tell you, had I not already been a really good lawyer,
Yeah.
and had I not had the help from my really good friend Gary Richardson, I would still be in prison today for something I did not do, just because I pissed off the wrong people.
Yeah.
Now, David, this siege went for 51 days?
Yeah.
Off and on gunfire, especially in the beginning and then toward the end.
Not off and on, no. There was no shots fired by us after the ceasefire.
Okay.
Period.
So the rest of them were fired by the ATF or
Correct.
FBI.
Yeah. Now,
And then the tanks showed up.
should I say what they claim?
Tell me what they
I
claim.
do wish to be fair. The FBI claims that during the final day, they received 80 to 200 gunshots against their CEVs. The reason I know that is not true, or if that's true, somebody on the other side of the building fired while the tanks were destroying the building and raising the back of the building on the ground. I couldn't hear it. I will allow for that possibility. But a gunshot's still pretty loud. Even with a lot going on, I'm pretty sure you could hear it from the other side of the building.
Mm-hmm.
I heard no shots the entire day. And I'm a very kind of feeling person, right? Kinesthetic, if you will. And so I react to how deeply I feel things. And I remember being terrified that whole day that we were being gassed because, the ferret rounds were popping through the window early on. They went through 380 ferret rounds. And then when they ran out and ordered more, that's when the decision was made to dismantle the building. And the tanks would come into the building and make holes. And when they would do that, they would spray the tear gas in, the CS gas, if you will. And they did that various areas. They made huge holes in 3 areas of the front of the building, on the side of the building, right where the hallways began. They even had a boom come up and make a big hole in the side of the second story, right where the hallway was. 33-mile-an-hour winds. It was whipping all that through there. It made a huge oxygen flow system through the building. I think they did that on purpose. In the civil trial, we had witnesses, expert witnesses, fire marshals, people within that world that were going to testify and say that yes, they were making an oxygen flow system. The judge, Walter Smith, didn't allow any of those expert witnesses to testify on our behalf.
Surprise! Walter Smith.
Our case against the government, the same guy that tried, the criminal trial. They also put him in charge of the civil case.
Yeah.
Unbelievable to me how fixed that trial was. I was disgusted. I was absolutely disgusted with the American judicial system and how corrupt. How these people win is by absolutely lying. They lie with impunity because they have complete immunity.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's just it, period.
Absolutely.
I have so much faith in the Constitution, so much faith in this country. And, that's hard for me to say, Vic, because when I went to, my dad was a history teacher. When I went to school and I was learning about the revolution of 1776, I could see myself freezing to death at Valley Forge with Washington. It's like what kid didn't pretend that they were, like when you're reading the scripture when you're a kid, how many Christians have said, oh, I would have walked with Christ. I would have been an apostle, or I would have been there for the apostles, right? So, I mean, you not so much fantasize, but you put yourself in these scenarios where it's like, you do the right thing. You're for honor. You're for what this country is supposed to be about. Then you find out in reality, it's totally different. It's like what they have geared us to believe in the country isn't real. And if they want to come after you, if you're a veteran, it doesn't matter. Like you said in your intro, which I love, if you're going after the criminals, you're a hero. If you're going after the criminals with badges, you're going to be the criminal.
Yeah.
And they choose who that is. And there's, I can't believe you won. You're a very lucky man.
Yeah, I really am.
I'm a very lucky man to not have gone to jail and be.
I'm very fortunate, and I believe that God intervened on many occasions. I do.
I want to make my country better.
I do too.
I hate to see it descending into what it is.
I do too.
But it's this, you know, I want to talk about something. I think this is very important. When I think of George Floyd, we all saw that video, a minute and a half. That guy sat on George Floyd's back until he died in front of us. And it was shocking. It was disgusting. It made me sick to my stomach. But it was nothing new. And the fact the whole country went crazy after that, and there was all the riots, the same thing with Rodney King. After the beating of Rodney King, we saw riots, we saw all that. This is going to sound funny until you hear the point, but as harsh as that sounds, that didn't happen because those people were killed. All those riots took place because of the lack of justice in the system.
Yes.
It's from decades and decades of minorities being treated like that. Imagine being black and being pulled over, and you have to fear every time for your life because you're pulled over at a traffic stop. Nobody should have to think they might get shot being pulled over at a red light. It's ridiculous. It's out of control, and it has been for decades. And so the reactions we see to these murders was because of the lack of justice that real people have experienced for decades and decades and decades. And, you know, you reap what you sow. This country is reaping what it's sowed, and it's not going to stop. If these people don't, there needs to be justice for Waco. These people should be in jail for what they did. David Chipman should not be the head of the ATF. Anyone that was involved in Waco should be lucky they get a retirement and shut the hell up for the rest of their lives unless they want to come forward and say what they really did. And that's one thing I try to encourage every time while I'm on a roll. I might as well do it. If you're an ATF guy or an FBI guy and you feel bad about what you did, or you feel bad about what you know, and you're not coming forward with the information, guess what? You're going to die. Your time's coming, man. We're all getting older.
Yeah.
So why don't you relieve yourself, get it off, get the burden off your chest, and go to your maker with a straight heart, and do the right thing and tell the truth to what you know and what you saw. I encourage anyone in law enforcement that has information about Waco to come forward. Now is the time. Do it.
It's time to come clean.
Don't die with that on your soul.
I agree. I so totally agree.
Don't die with that on your soul. Yeah.
David, tell us how it was that you got out alive. That must have been mayhem. It must have been so frightening, so loud. I think about the noise, the smoke, the smells. How did you do it?
It was 6 hours. The 6 hours. I mean, when you think they started at 6 a.m, and the fire began around 12:09, 12:08, somewhere around there. First of all, you know, early in the morning, you hear the popping sounds from the 40 millimeters. The speaker system comes on. It was Byron Sage. And he says, the siege is over. We're going to be injecting, he didn't say CS gas. He said a tear gas into the building.
Byron Sage was there and he did that?
Yeah.
Byron Sage led the crew that arrested me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. He was the main FBI negotiator toward the end. He was the guy that we heard every day. This is Byron Sage. I'm your FBI negotiator. I'll be here today. Yeah, that's like you got the tenor of his voice down after hearing him all that time. But on the last day, it was, you're under arrest. Come on out. The siege is over. We're going to be putting gas into the building. It'll render the building inhabitable. It'll soak into your clothing and your furniture. You will not be able to use any things anymore. It's time to come out. That was interesting, the way they said how the destruction of the building would be complete with the CS gas, and he's basically telling us we wouldn't be able to come back, which I thought was very weird psychology, trying to get people out. But there was a lot of, like, you know, there's a professor named Stuart Wright. His writing's on my website, wacosurvivors.com. There I got a whole section for Stuart. But he said early on, it's too bad there isn't a rule book the FBI goes when they're in a situation where people could die, when there's a barricaded situation. Turns out they do have a rule book, and he went through all the rules and found 11 violations of the FBI's own rule book. So they violated 11 of their own principles if they want people to come out alive and safely. And they kept saying, remember, it's all about the children. The FBI, it's all about the children. Bring the children out. Let the children go. Let the children. We're here for the children. Then why did you violate 11 principles out of your own book to get people out? I mean, there was a lot of deep psychological things that happened during the course of the 51 days. But we can go back to that in a minute. But on that last day, Byron's saying, everyone come out. So I was in the chapel area. And what happened is we opened the windows. And because there was such a wind, the tanks would come in, make a hole, put the gas in. We'd have our masks on. If you took your mask off, you would be, crying instantly. But it would blow the gas out from the area we were in. I don't think that other people were that lucky because they were in areas of the building that were more secluded, if you will, especially the concrete structure where the kids were. Now, the kids were supposed to have been put in the underground bus, but we know that they had destroyed the wall that had the entranceway to the underground bus. So it looked like there was too much debris, from what I understand, to get to the underground bus. I wasn't able to see that. When the tanks went into the building, they cut off passages to the building. So there was no way to get from where I was to where the concrete structure was. It was blocked off by debris. The concrete structure is where all the kids were put under wet blankets to try to escape the gas. And they might have done okay had it not been for the tank that went through the building directly to where the concrete structure was. And that's probably a good 10 to 20 yards through the building, and then sprayed the CS gas directly into the concrete structure. So a lot of the kids, they were actually choked to death by the gas.
Wow.
And, they did a good job of representing that in the series. And, for me, watching that scene being filmed, it was like being at Auschwitz, looking at the Cyclone B being put into the chamber. That's all I could think of. It was that direct of a parallel. And I know it sounds like I'm being dramatic, but, kids are being gassed to death. I don't care if it's CS gas or Cyclone B. You're gassing children to death.
Right.
And you're blaming the parents for it.
Right.
You have the arrogance to gas kids to death and blame their parents for it. Who the hell do you think you are?
I agree. How did you get out, though?
Okay. Thanks for directing me back. I get off on tangents in case you didn't know. So, being in the chapel area, there was a causeway behind the chapel area. It was like a hallway, and behind the hallway was where the gymnasium was. Now, through the course of the 6 hours, I say 10 in the morning, 9 in the morning, the tanks started to come into the gymnasium and tear it down. And you can see pictures of this. I have pictures of this on the website. And you can see the tanks in the gymnasium, pieces of the ceiling, and then the whole gymnasium comes down and is leveled to the ground. So during the course of a few hours, they're coming in, you hear this incredible scraping sound that shakes the entire structure. And that's them leveling, the gym. And on the infrared, now it sounds like I'm skipping around, but the FBI, and again, this isn't Davidian technology, the FBI's own technology, they had a plane flying above the building from 2 miles up. And on that plane, there was an infrared video camera. And that infrared video was shooting what was happening. And when the plane comes around, you see the tank go into the structure. And then you see these fully automatic weapons fire. It's like white blast. Now, what infrared is if it's hot, anything that's hot shows up as white. Anything that is cool shows up as dark. So the landscape, even though it's a hot Texas day, shows up as dark. Every time the agent puts his foot on the gas on the tank, you see a white plume from the back of the tank. That's because it's heat. You also see these really fast, fully automatic weapons, shots of light. Boom, 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 boom. Well, the FBI claims that is sunlight reflection, reflecting off something at the back of the building. Listen, I think anyone with, oh my God, you don't need a college degree to look at an infrared, understand what it is, and say that's fully automatic weapons fire. That is not sunlight reflection. I'm sorry, it just isn't. But that's how they've justified this. And the fact that this isn't headline news in every paper that people were shot trying to exit the back of the building, it's to this day blows my mind. It's the greatest cover-up in history. Enough people know about it, but you're never going to hear it in the mainstream ever. They just can't.
So people were trying to get out of the back of the building, and this automatic gunfire was taking them down.
Yeah, but the one I was talking about earlier, that happened 10:30, like when the tanks are going in, we see it that early. But then later, when the place is burning, you also see two different shooters and fully automatic weapons fire coming from two different positions.
So the weapons fire wasn't coming from the tank; it was coming from somewhere behind
It's coming
it.
from right next to the tank.
All right.
As a military maneuver, someone gets out of the bottom of the tank, rolls over, and shoots when they're next to the tank. And it looks very much like a military maneuver.
Okay.
From here's the tank, like here's the shooter right here. You don't see the shooter, but you see the flashes.
The flashes.
And that's one of the things the FBI has said, though it couldn't be because you would see a figure. I'm not so sure about that. I don't think you would see a figure.
No.
And as I recall, excuse me, I just went through puberty again for some reason there with my voice. But as I recall, the original version I saw that was being for the Mike Nolte's documentary called Waco, The Rules of Engagement. That's when this first came to light. I went to William Gazecki's house, who was the editor, producer. I went to his house and he was showing me the infrared. And you actually could see the outline of a figure. It was a much clearer version than was on the actual documentary, because that's gone through a degeneration every time it's played. It goes through degeneration, right? And I remember that tape being clear. Now, the tape that they showed for Congress was even clearer, but nobody knew what to look for. They didn't know to look for that at the congressional hearing. That information hadn't come out, but it's there. So I would love to get a better copy and have experts look at that tape, but that'll never be allowed. And, we did have an expert that was going to testify for Congress, and he ended up dead just a few days before the congressional hearing.
So one ends up dead, and the rest Walter Smith struck and wouldn't let testify.
Yeah.
And this is the same Walter Smith that, was the only character witness against me in the Below trial. And I'm telling you, Gary Richardson cross-examined him and ripped that guy a new butthole.
Good.
That cross-examination is on our website right now, vicfeazell.com. So anybody wants to read it, go there and read Walter Smith's cross-examination. Gary Richardson just murderized that guy.
I'm looking forward to reading
And he was a
that,
federal judge.
Yeah.
And
who kept falling asleep, by the way, during our trial.
Not surprised, because he was usually drunk.
Yeah.
Yeah. He finally got removed from the bench for sexual misconduct, but he's still drawing full salary, over $200,000 a year for the rest of his unnatural life. And so many injustices perpetrated by that man. And he's drawing federal retirement over $200,000 a year for the rest of his life.
The system protects itself.
Yeah, it
above
does.
all things.
So, how'd you get out of the building?
I want to talk about Walter Smith more.
We'll get back to Walter. Just tell me which wall you came out of. Was it a window? Was it a wall that fell down? How was it?
So in your mind's eye, picture the front of the building. On the side of the building, if you remember where the agent on the first day put the ladder and went up the ladder and tried to get in that room, threw a flashbang grenade in, went in, and then you see all these shots come out and he comes out and then goes down the ladder. Almost just beyond that ladder was that area that I was talking about, between the chapel and the gym. And the tanks had come in to where there was a window and made a hole in that window. So there was a big hole in the wall where we all could have gotten out of at any time. Well, I guess they made it, like later in the afternoon. But nobody wanted to exit that building. Now, I want you people at home to try to people say, why didn't you come out? The tanks are going into the building. Why didn't you come out? Listen, when you see a tank come through your living room and you have to jump out of the way, as I did, to avoid the tank coming through your front door, you don't go out that hole. You don't go out to the people that have just rammed your house with a tank. You just don't, man. You don't. Every one of us thought that we were going to be shot had we exited that building.
Right. That's legitimate. Yes.
Psychologically, that's what we thought. The only reason I came out is because the wall behind me caught fire and I could hear my hair singeing. And within a split-second decision, I made an executive decision. I said, okay, I'd rather be shot to death than to burn to death. So when I came out the window, I anticipated being shot. I didn't think I'd survive it. And I don't even know if I would have come out had I not seen Jamie and Derek go out of the hall, the wall, the hole in the wall. They went out and I followed suit behind them. I'm thinking no one could make it out behind me. And I turned around, I saw Clive Doyle coming out. He was patting his arms down. His arms were smoking.
I knew Clive. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Clive made it out right behind me.
Yeah.
And then he could hear, I couldn't hear this, thank God, but he said that he could hear Wayne Martin screaming. Because minutes before the wall caught fire, Wayne Martin was to my left. I was leaning against the wall. And I looked over to Wayne, and he was standing up and leaning against the wall. And the smoke was coming around him. It was so weird. I could just see the smoke enveloping him. He took his gas mask off and he slid down the wall into a crouched position. And then I couldn't see him anymore because there was so much smoke. And that's when the wall caught fire. It singed my hair. I went out of the hole. And then I turned around and saw Clive. Now, Clive's story was when he came out, he could hear Wayne screaming. So Wayne had caught on fire and was dying that worst death that I was trying to avoid. The image of him sliding down that wall, though, was something I'll never, ever forget.
That's so sad. So then you rolled on out into the dirt?
Yeah, unlike the series, I didn't, fly out of the window. I walked out. But we walked to where there was a Red Cross sign at the end of the property, right where the W Ranch Road was. And Byron kept saying through the sound system, go to the Red Cross sign. If you come out shooting, we're going to shoot you. Nobody came out. Everyone came out with their hands up. So we went to the Red Cross sign. They put us in a line in front of one of the tanks. They put the plastic straps on our hands behind our back. And there was 2 FBI guys. One was a blonde guy and one was a dark-haired individual. One had the dark-haired individual had a mustache. And he had an AR-15. And the blonde guy had a pad of paper and a pencil, and he was writing. And they were saying, where are the kids? You know where the kids are. You have to live with this for the rest of your life. Where are the children? I said, the children should be in the underground bus. You guys know all about the underground bus. And he said, the other guy said to him, we tear gas the bus. And I was just like, oh my God, I thought to myself. And then they said, I knew this wasn't going to work. We should have gone with plan B. So I thought plan B was a full frontal assault, but I guess that could have been, well, the original plan apparently was they were supposed to gas for 2 days. And then if no one came out within that 2 days, they were going to make other arrangements. But they changed the plan to using all the gas that they had within that 6-hour period.
Wow.
So let's talk about the CS gas and the type of gas they use.
Yeah, tell us about that.
The CS gas has been banned internationally under the Geneva Convention.
Yes, it has.
We cannot use it in wartime because it's so terrible and horrible of a gas. It's supposed to be, according to the manufacturer's report, it's a riot control agent only to be used outdoors, never indoors. And it specifically says never to be used indoors against especially kids and older people with undeveloped respiratory tracts. Could literally kill them. So that's the kind of stuff they use. Now, the propellant for CS gas is methylene chloride. So the CS gas, they say, was not flammable. Technically, that's true. However, it is also a powder. So it's like, it's not really gas, it's powder that's sprayed everywhere. And just like any kind of powder in a grain silo.
Yeah, just like corn.
It can go up. The other problem is the methylene chloride. Now that was the propellant, which makes it go all over. Methylene chloride is the same stuff that they use in paint thinner, which is flammable.
Yes, it is.
And so they use so much, and they covered so much of the inside of the building. Now this is an interesting, I've kind of, made this observation over the years, but when you see the building burning, what do you see? Incredibly dark smoke coming up from the building. That's a chemical fire is what you're seeing there. Now, to contrast that, when you see that big explosion that happens on the tower a few minutes into it, I actually was walking up to the Red Cross sign. I got halfway, which was about 100 yards. I got about 50 yards up. I turned around and saw that giant fireball. Just whoosh. When you watch the playback of that fireball is a clean burn. It's very quick, it's very red, and then it dissipates into nothing. There's no smoke at all. You contrast that to the rest of the building burning, and you see this real dark cloud. So that's the difference in the fire. I mean, it's not a clean burn; it's a chemical burn. It's to me, it's because of a lot of the CS gas. Now, when the CS gas burns, it also causes a cyanide poisoning and creates cyanide gas. And some of the kids were actually found to have cyanide poisoning in their systems. Yeah. And this is one of those things the FBI or the media has used to say that, poison our kids, beatings and stabbings, they said when the Justice Department report came out. We were talking about this in lunch, right? We didn't cover this yet. Because this is one of the things that it made me crazy. After the fact, and after I was back in Maine, I had talked to Rodney Crowe. He was one of the pathologists. The head of the pathology team that was doing all the work on the bodies. And he said his report, they had finished their report. And he said, I would be happy with the findings. They found that many of the kids died of blunt force trauma that occurred when chunks of concrete from the ceiling of the concrete structure fell in on them. Now, we don't know if that happened from a tank hitting it or the stress of the fire. I don't know. It looks like if you see the pictures in some of the documentaries, it looks like there was a hole blown into the top. I don't know. I don't know what happened or how that happened, but for sure some of the kids died of blunt force trauma. When the Justice Department report came out, of course they did, they were on all the channels, made sure that it went out nationally. They said, our report will show that in the final minutes of the conflagration, the Davidians beat and stabbed their children to death.
Gee.
And when they said that, I absolutely lost it. I mean, I was livid. I was so angry. I was swearing. I was yelling at the TV. I was not controlling myself because I had just talked to Rodney Crowe. He told me the opposite. And I think I told you guys this story at lunch. But the only thing that brought me down from that just intense anger was my uncle who had been in Vietnam and served his country, Bob Gainham, who died last year. But my uncle Bob Gainham, who had been, air traffic control in Vietnam, saw my anger and he brought it up a notch. And he started yelling at the TV saying, it's the exact same thing they did to us in Nam. They did this shit. They lied about it. He was louder than I was. And that brought me down. And it was a great moment between me and my uncle because I understood the pain that he went through from someone who served his country and still got lied about and got lied to about why he was there and what he was doing. His country screwing him over. And it was that same kind of thing. Here's the Justice Department, all the power in the world, and they're going to say that we beat and stabbed our kids to death like we're the ultimate devils of all time. It was absolutely disgusting. And what really made it hard is that I have no way to counter this. There's no CNN crew in my room while I'm watching this. It's all them. It's all their control of the situation.
Correct.
There's no way to counter it. And you just got to live with it. You have to live with that. And then you got to go out and face your neighbors the next day and face the people in your community. And it's no wonder, every room I've ever walked into, it's hushed tones and, hey, it's the Waco guy.
Yeah.
That sucks. To have to live with that one, knowing there's just another side. It's nice to have, because of the series, that's changed quite a bit. And I think historically people see a different side of it now. And thank God the people of Mount Carmel have been humanized because they deserve, at the very least, for people to know that they were real people. They weren't these crazy satanic cultists. And that's when you hear the word cult, you tend to want to put the word satanic in front of it.
Oh, yeah.
That's just how it's all get. Mm-hmm. They were just people that really wanted to know the Bible and study the Bible. And it's not my fault that there's some crazy stuff in the Bible. And if you're hearing this for the first time, people, there's some crazy stuff in the Bible.
Crazy stuff.
Crazy stuff.
Yeah.
All sins are covered in the scripture. Let me just put it that way. So, a lot of people think of it as the good book, and it is, but it's also...
Oh, it's a nasty book.
It's all about...
Especially the Old Testament.
It's human history is what it is. It's there. It's all covered.
Yeah.
The genocide, the sexuality, all of it.
Hi, I'm Vic Feazell. During these trying times, you might want to just stay home. And at the law offices of Vic Feazell, we understand.
That's why we're set up to handle your personal injury claim without you even having to come in. Just give us a call, and we'll take it from there. We can send any paperwork straight to your smartphone or computer. Don't delay, because if we don't put money in your pocket, you don't owe us anything. I'm Vic Feazell.